Hey folks, this is Caleb Foshu, the Dust Bowl Catholic, and this is my Catholic Dollar. All right, well, you saw it right there. This is where the rubber really hits the road. This is the week that we're going to talk about paying off our debts. Okay, we've already got our budget. We've got $1,000 in the bank, so that if something happens, we won't be making a bigger hole. And now it's time to attack those debts. But first, let's look at what St. Teresa talks to us about in the interior castle. Here we go. This is the third mansion. And in the third mansion, St. Teresa says, we overcome our initial difficulties. And now we avoid even venial sins and we become good stewards of life and our possessions so that we get smaller and God gets bigger. On the My Catholic Dollar side, we've overcome our pride and sloth. Those were our initial difficulties. We raised our hand. We said, I have a problem. We're no longer going to be lazy. We're going to attack this. And as a result, we're going to be good stewards by eliminating debt using the snowball technique. All right, snowball technique. If you've ever listened to Dave Ramsey or read anything that he does, this is not new to you. In fact, if you Google anything, there's lots and lots of people that use the snowball technique. And we'll get to a good example to show you how it works here in a second. But a lot of you may be saying, well, I'm servicing my debt. I can afford all these payments every month. I really don't need to do this. Or maybe you're even saying, well, I just will go file bankruptcy. I have no hope. I'm just going to throw the towel in and that'll be it. Let's see what the Bible and the church has to say about that attitude. In Psalm chapter 37, the first part of verse 21, it says, the wicked borrows, but it does not pay back. Wow, wicked. Not just, if you borrow and don't pay it back, that's bad. That actually says you are wicked, okay? So let's take this further. Like I said, we'll go to what the church says in the catechism. Here we go. In chapter 24:11, it says, contracts are subject to commutative justice. Commutative justice obliges strictly. It requires paying debts and fulfilling obligations freely contracted. So if you go back a couple weeks, we've already covered this, that any sort of debt that you have is technically a contract. And per the church's teaching in the catechism that we just talked about there, we are obliged to pay it. If you do not pay it, you are potentially in mortal sin. Now I say potentially because I'm not going to judge your intentions, okay? And that's a key part of a sin being mortal is the intention involved. So, as we move forward, we've got our budget, we've got our, it's just, now's the time to take action. Now is the time to really step up and get the job done. But let's look a little bit at what the Bible has to say about paying off our debts. Because as I mentioned before, a lot of people would say, well, I can afford these debts. I can afford these payments. What's the big deal? Let's see what it has to say. In Sirach, chapter 18, it says, let nothing hinder you from paying a vow promptly, and do not wait until death to be released from it. Do not wait until death. Oh, so we're supposed to pay these off before we die, or we're not constantly supposed to be in a state of debt? Looks like it. All right, let's look at another reference. Again in Sirach, chapter 18, verse 33, do not become a beggar by feasting with borrowed money when you have nothing in your purse. So, Nothing in your purse, borrowed money. If the only way you're making ends meet is because you have a loan on that car, because you have that credit card, or because you were able to put Christmas on a credit card, that's exactly what we're talking about here. What we're wanting to do is get rid of all that debt and set it up to where we have the cash to come along on birthdays and Christmases and every other thing that comes along and use cash. We don't want to use the debt for it. That way we can be better stewards of the money that God has entrusted us with and give it to the church or help out a neighbor or a family member or whatever it takes. All right? So we talked about the snowball. Here is an example of a very simple snowball. Here we go. So we're going to assume that after you make your budget every month that you've got $500 left over to throw at debts and any little thing that's left over, okay? So you've done your first four, that's church, food, housing, utilities, okay? And you've come down, you've got all your other bills, and then you've got your debt payments, okay? So we're gonna assume that you've got a little bit of everything. Credit card, doctor bill, signature loan, because you got that flyer in the mail from the bank that said, hey, Christmas is on us, and you took them up on it. And then you got a car loan in there. And so what the first thing you're gonna do is list your debts from smallest amount owed to largest amount owed, okay? And then you're gonna list your minimum payments right next to that, okay? And any extra money that you have left over at the end of the month, you throw at the smallest one, okay? So assuming you have $500, using these examples, you've got an extra $110 that you can throw at your debts. So if you're throwing $115 at that $250 credit card debt, then in 2 months you're going to have the credit card paid off, and then you're going to roll that $115 to the next debt, the doctor bill. Okay, now you're throwing $165 at it instead of just the $50 minimum payment. All right, and after 4 months of doing that, the doctor bill all of a sudden disappears. Now you've got the signature loan and the car loan left, okay? And you're gonna throw every extra penny, so now we've got $225 that we're throwing at that signature loan instead of the minimum payment of $60. And after 4 months of doing that, all you're left with is your car loan, and your car loan is down to $12,250, okay? So in the span of 10 months, you've gone from 4 debts of over $17,000 to 1 debt of $12,250, and you now have $500 a month that you can throw at that thing. So look, there is hope. This is, follow the example. Take a look at it. You can do this too. List your debts. Do it all just like we did here. It doesn't have to be complicated. And in 10 months, you could be in the same situation. Now, here's the hard part. If you do some quick math in your head, $12,000 divided by 500 is 24 months. That's why this step, while it is the most important step, is also the hardest step and the longest step. You've got to stay motivated. You've got to keep on chugging and plugging at this thing. Now, just because you only have $500 to throw at it now doesn't mean that you can't go get a second job. Or it doesn't mean that you can go find something else to sell that you've got in your garage or your attic or in the corner collecting dust. Every little thing that you can find, throw at this thing because you want to get it over as quickly as possible. It will suck your soul down if you're not careful, all right? So that's what you've got to do. You've got to maintain your intensity and your drive, and you've got to get this done. Just think what it would be like if you paid everything else off but your house. How much easier would your life be? All right. So now I can hear a lot of you saying, it's so hard to do this. I want to go out to lunch with my friends. I want to go play and buy football tickets, or, oh yeah, lottery tickets. I like lottery tickets. No, You can't do that. Let's see what St. Paul says in the book of Romans. Here we go. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Boom. That's what we want to do as Catholics. What is good and acceptable and perfect and within the will of God. Is it really the will of God that you, instead of being able to give more money to the church, or instead of being able to help out your neighbor, or instead of taking care of your kids the best way that you can, that instead we're going to keep sending money to the banks that don't care about us or the church, and or that you need to go buy that lunch or whatever with your group from work. Okay? Yeah. Now, I'm not saying you can still go to lunch with them, and get a glass of water, but take your lunch with you to work. How much cheaper is that? You can't eat lunch out for less than $10 anymore. Even if you go to McDonald's, it's not as cheap as it used to be. There's no longer the $3 value meal. So use the money, prioritize the money, so that we can be good stewards of it. All right? Now, once you get 12 to 18 months in, this is going to start to grind on you, because even though you've made all this progress, you're going to be like, this will never end. Okay, so I suggest that you make yourself your chart. You can get, do some Googling. There's some great stuff out there. You can make a chart, you can use a funnel and all these fancy things so that you can track your progress as you go along, because think about it. In our simple example, in 10 months, you went from over 17,000 to just over 12,000. Okay, imagine how much better you'd feel about that. But I want you to think about this as you get ground down, as the world is pushing you and saying, oh, you go get that coffee, it's okay, you can spare an extra $3 this month, or boy, I really would like a new pair of shoes, or my coat, even though it keeps me warm, it doesn't look as nice as I want it to. I think I need a new one. Run. Okay? Don't say either. When you hear the word run, you run. Okay? Let's look at what in the Old Testament Joseph did when he was tempted. So in the story of Joseph, he's the father of Israel, basically. And he was his father's favorite, and his brothers hated him because of this. And so they sold him into slavery, and his master's name was Potiphar, and he had full control over Potiphar's housing and money and all that good stuff. And Potiphar's wife decided that Joseph was just what she wanted. So here's the story. In Genesis chapter 39, but one day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house, she caught him by the garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. That's exactly what we've got to do. When you feel the world tugging at you, saying, please come back, no, you've got to flee. Throw everything off and flee. Run from temptation. Run from sin, potentially. Run. Your life cannot depend on this. You've got to depend on God, and to depend on God means that you want to serve Him the best way that you can. That means being a good steward and running from the temptation that keeps you in the slavery of debt. Proverbs: the borrower is slave to the lender. Run from slavery. Here's this week's homework. I bet you know what the first couple are. The first one is prayer and calling on Saint Teresa. As usual, these are our key points in this entire program. The second one is communicate still. You're still going to talk to your spouse. And during this step, this is when you both lean on each other the most, when you get frustrated, when you're trying to think of ways to make it end quicker, when you need just a little bit more help and saying, man, those people at work, they trying to get me to go to lunch, and she's like, oh no, we've got a plan. That's where you both come together and work as a team. And of course, you're going to start your debt snowball. You're going to list your debts from smallest to largest, throw every penny you can at the smallest one, and when that one's paid off, you go to the next one. Be sure to keep all of them up to date by their minimum payments as well. I'm Caleb Foshi with the Dust Bowl Catholic's My Catholic Dollar. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, and put a comment below. I want to know what you think. Let me know how you've done with your snowball and how much you've got left, or how much you've paid off and how quickly you did it. Give us some ideas on how to make extra money to throw at your debt. We'll see you next week, and until that time, be not afraid.